Ave Maria, welcome to the Rosary Team Podcast. Today we are opening the file on, well, perhaps the single most consequential question in human history. We're going to be conducting an investigation into the historic figure of Jesus of Nazareth. And we aren't looking at him simply as, a cultural influencer or a moral philosopher, but we are stress testing the reasoned evidence, historical, textual, and even scientific, that supports the very specific claim that he is exactly who he said he was, God.
It is the ultimate claim, and frankly, that means it comes with the ultimate burden of proof. I'm glad to be here to play the role of the rigorous skeptic, because when we step into this territory, we're talking divinity, miracles, resurrection. We are stepping way outside the comfortable laws of physics and materialist observation. So my goal today is just to ensure we don't confuse sentimental comfort with, actual historical reality. As the saying goes, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
And I welcome that scrutiny, I really do. In fact, my whole premise here is that the Christian claim doesn't need to hide behind blind faith. When you actually strip away the cultural biases and just look at the raw data, the manuscript tradition, forensic anomalies, the probability math, the evidence for Jesus being God is, I would argue, it's actually more robust than the evidence for many things we just accept as historical fact.
Okay, that's a very bold opener. I hear that from apologists often, but I have to push back immediately on that idea of it being stronger than historical fact. I mean, we have coins with Tiberius Caesar's face on them, we have busts of Alexander the Great, we have accounts of their wars written by their own generals. With Jesus, you're asking us to rely on texts written by his, let's be honest, his fan club, decades after he died. How is that robust?
That is the common perception. But let's zoom in on the discipline of textual criticism for a second. This is how historians evaluate the reliability of any ancient document, not just the Bible. You mentioned Tiberius Caesar. So our primary knowledge of the Roman Empire in that specific era comes from the Annals of Tacitus. Do you know how many manuscripts of that work we actually have?
I'd assume a fair amount. I mean, given it's a standard history text taught in universities.
We have exactly 2. And the earliest one of those dates to about 700 years after Tacitus died. So there's a 7th-century gap where we just have to trust that the text wasn't altered or deleted or completely rewritten. And yet no historian doubts Tiberius existed or that the annals are reliable.
Okay, fair, but Tacitus wasn't claiming to be the creator of the universe. The stakes are, they're much lower, so we accept the documents more easily.
True. The stakes are absolutely different, but the standard of evidence should be applied consistently. If we take that Tacitus standard and apply it to the New Testament, the result is, it's technically overwhelming. We don't have 2 copies. We have roughly 25,000 extant manuscripts in Greek, Latin, and other languages. And the time gap isn't 700 years. We have fragments like the Papyro 52 or the 7Q5 found in Qumran that date to the 1st century. We're talking about a gap of decades, not centuries.
But quantity doesn't necessarily equal truth, right? I could print 25,000 copies of a falsehood today. And this brings up the whole telephone game theory, which is the standard objection. Over 2,000 years, you have monks, scribes, political agendas. Surely the text was polished. Maybe the purely human Jesus was edited out and the divine Jesus was written in later.
That's the legend theory, that the divinity was a later invention. But that theory just collapses under the weight of those 25,000 manuscripts. If the text was evolving over time, we would see that evolution in the documents. We should be able to find an early 2nd century manuscript that says, Jesus was a great guy, but just a man, and then maybe a 4th century one that adds, actually, he is God.
And we don't see that divergence at all?
We don't. Across all those thousands of documents, 99.8% of the text is pure regarding the core dogma. The variations are tiny, spelling differences, word order, nothing that changes the central narrative of divinity. If there was some conspiracy to invent godhood, they did a miraculous job of destroying every single copy of the original human story across the entire Mediterranean.
Okay, so let's assume for the sake of the debate that the text is stable. We have what they wrote. But that just moves us to the next tranche of skepticism, doesn't it? Just because they wrote it down doesn't mean it's true. It just means they believed it. And that brings us to the man himself,
Exactly. We have to look at the profile of the man.
Right, so you have the famous liar, lunatic, or Lord trilemma. But I think we need to look really hard at that lunatic option. We see cult leaders today, charismatic, magnetic personalities, who genuinely believe they are divine. They aren't lying, they're just deluded. Why isn't Jesus simply a first-century megalomaniac?
It's a valid question, but we have to analyze the psychiatric profile that's presented in the records. A megalomaniac or a paranoid schizophrenic, they have a specific behavioral footprint. They're erratic, they spiral, they're obsessed with their own needs, and they usually crack under pressure.
And Jesus didn't?
Well, read the accounts of the Passion or his interactions with the Pharisees. He's described as the most deliberate man in history. He's calm, intellectually razor-sharp, and incredibly patient. Even his contemporary enemies, and he had many who wanted him dead, they never accused him of being insane. They accused him of blasphemy, of breaking the Sabbath, even of being a glutton or a drunkard, but they never once said, just ignore him, he's crazy.
What about the liar aspect, though? You said people don't lie for no reason, but people lie for power all the time. Maybe he started a movement, it got out of hand, and he just decided to ride the wave to the end?
I find that very hard to square with the outcome. Psychology tells us people lie for basically 3 reasons: to gain money, to gain power, or to avoid pain. Jesus got no money. He died penniless. He gained no political power. He flat out refused to lead an army against Rome. And he certainly did not avoid pain.
But people die for lies all the time. Suicide bombers, martyrs, and other faiths, they die for what they believe is true.
But that is the crucial distinction. Modern martyrs die for a belief they inherited. They have faith that it's true. The apostles, the inner circle, they didn't die for a belief. They died for what they claimed they saw. They were in a position to know if it was a hoax. If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, if he was a liar, the apostles knew it.
So you're saying that if it was a conspiracy, someone would have cracked?
Precisely. 11 of the 12 apostles were martyred. They were tortured. Now, typically, torture is used to extract a confession, tell us the truth. But the Romans tortured the Christians to get them to shut up, to deny what they saw. All they had to do was say, okay, we made it up, you stayed in the grave, and they would have lived. Not one of them recanted. People will die for a truth. Only a crazy person dies for a lie that they know is a lie.
I see the logic there. It's that Watergate principle. Conspiracies unravel because people can't keep their mouths shut to save their own skins. But okay, let's look outside the bubble of the believers for a minute. If this man was doing miracles and causing earthquakes, where are the Romans? Where are the hostile witnesses?
They're right there in the historical record. We have at least 24 non-Christian sources from the 1st and 2nd centuries: Tacitus, Suetonius, Pliny the Younger, Flavius Josephus, and the Talmud.
But do they confirm the miracles? Or do they just confirm that a guy named Jesus caused some trouble?
They confirm the timeline and the core claims. Tacitus confirms the crucifixion under Pilate. But look at someone like Celsus. He was a Greek philosopher in the 2nd century who wrote this vicious attack on Christianity. He hated the religion, but in his own writing, he calls Jesus a sorcerer.
A sorcerer?
Yes, and by calling him a sorcerer, Celsus is actually admitting that Jesus performed supernatural feats. He couldn't deny the events. They were too well known, so he attacked the source of the power. He claimed it was magic or demonic, but he didn't claim it didn't happen. That is hostile corroboration.
That is an interesting nuance. He couldn't debunk the what, so he attacked the how. Okay, let's pivot to the when. You're relying heavily on historical data, but the religious claim relies on prophecy. I've always found prophecy to be a bit of a Texas sharpshooter fallacy.
Meaning?
You know, you shoot an arrow at a barn wall and then you go and paint the bullseye around where it lands. You find some vague verse in the Old Testament and say, look, Jesus fits this. It just feels retroactive.
And that would be a fair critique if the prophecies were vague like a horoscope. You will meet a tall, dark stranger. But the Messianic prophecies were incredibly specific, particularly regarding the timeline. I mean, take the weeks of Daniel from the book of Daniel, or the prophecy of Malachi regarding the temple.
Malachi? Refresh my memory on that one.
The prophet Malachi, writing centuries before Christ, stated that the Lord, the Messiah, would suddenly come to his temple.
This implies a hard deadline. The Messiah must arrive before the Jewish temple is destroyed.
And we know from history, from Josephus and Titus, that the temple was completely destroyed by the Roman legions in 70 AD.
Exactly. And it has never been rebuilt. So, logically, if the Messiah didn't come before 70 AD, then the prophecy failed. The window of opportunity slammed shut almost 2,000 years ago.
Wait, never rebuilt? I seem to recall reading about an attempt to rebuild it.
You're thinking of Julian the Apostate. He was a Roman emperor in the 4th century who abandoned Christianity and wanted to return Rome to paganism. He despised the Galileans, and he knew that if he could rebuild the Jewish temple, he would prove Jesus wrong and prove the prophecy of Malachi false.
So it was a kind of theological power play?
It was a rigorous test. He gave the money, the architects, the manpower. They started digging the foundations, but contemporary historians, including pagan ones like Ammianus Marcellinus, record that balls of fire burst from the foundations, burning the workers and making the place inaccessible. The project was totally abandoned.
That does sound like folklore.
And even if you strip away the balls of fire as, natural gas explosions or seismic activity, the historical fact remains. The Emperor of Rome, with all his resources, could not rebuild that temple. The window remained closed. The probability of Jesus fulfilling the timing, the location of Bethlehem, and the lineage all by accident is mathematically infinitesimal.
I'll grant you, the 70 AD deadline is a sticky problem for skeptics. If the Messiah had to appear before the temple fell, the list of candidates gets very, very short.
It forces a decision. The arrow hit the bullseye before the barn burned down.
Okay, before we move into the more controversial scientific claims you've prepared, which I warn you I'm going to scrutinize very heavily, I think maybe we should just take a brief moment.
Yes, that's a good idea. We are navigating a lot of heavy intellectual and historical terrain here. But for many, this isn't just data. It's a relationship. It's about bringing the reality of this king into your daily life. And if you're looking to deepen that devotion or just bring some beauty into your home, I'd really encourage you to visit rosaryteam.com.
I've seen the collection. They have some beautiful icons of Christ, art for your walls, and materials to aid in prayer. It's one thing to debate the history. It's another to live with the images that have defined Western civilization for 2 millennia.
Absolutely. So visit rosaryteam.com to acquire these icons. Now, let's get back to the debate. We've talked history and prophecy. Now I want to address the elephant in the room, miracles.
And this is where I usually check out. You mentioned earlier that science supports the claim, but science is about repeatability. Miracles, by their very definition, break the laws of nature. You can't put a resurrection in a test tube.
You can't put the resurrection in a test tube, no, but you can put the evidence of modern miracles in one. I want to talk specifically about Eucharistic miracles.
I know the story. A medieval priest doubts, the host bleeds, and 500 years later we're told the legend. It sounds like folklore.
Well, that might have been the case for Bolsena or Lanciano in the distant past, but I'm talking about the age of forensics. I'm talking about Buenos Aires in 1996, Tixla in 2006, and Legnica, Poland in 2016. In these cases, the red substance that was found on the consecrated host was sent to secular, non-religious laboratories.
And were these blind samples? Did the scientists have any idea they were analyzing a miracle?
No. In the Buenos Aires case, the sample was sent to a lab in New York. The famous cardiologist and forensic pathologist Dr. Frederick Zugibe analyzed it. He was not told what it was at all. He thought he was analyzing a tissue sample from a crime scene.
And what were the findings?
He identified it as human heart tissue, specifically myocardium from the left ventricle, which is the part of the heart that pumps blood to the entire body. But here's the anomaly that completely stumped him. The tissue contained intact white blood cells.
Okay, for the non-doctors listening, why is that so significant?
White blood cells are incredibly fragile. When you die or when tissue is removed from a living body, they disintegrate. They undergo apoptosis within minutes. You just cannot find intact white blood cells in a piece of dried tissue or old blood. Dr. Zugabe told the people who brought him the sample this heart was alive at the moment the sample was taken.
alive, but it was a piece of unleavened bread?
Exactly. When they told him it was from a consecrated host, kept in water for 3 years, he was stunned. There's no scientific explanation for white blood cells surviving in that medium for that long. And what's more, the tissue showed signs of severe physiological stress trauma consistent with being beaten severely around the chest.
And this holds up across different cases?
Legnica in 2016 showed the exact same thing. Myocardium, under stress, integrated into the bread in a way that the fibers were interwoven, something that's impossible to fabricate without destroying the structures. And the blood type?
Let me guess.
Type AB, the same rare blood type found on the Shroud of Turin and the Sudarium of Oviedo.
Type AB is rare, yeah, only about 3 to 5% of the population. The consistency it's coincidental, to say the very least.
It led Dr. Ricardo Castagnan, who was a former atheist doctor hired specifically to debunk these miracles, to convert. He was looking for the fraud, for that black ball that proved it was all fake. Instead, he found living white blood cells in dead matter. He realized the evidence was pointing in a direction his atheism just couldn't follow.
You mentioned this black ball. This is the atheism of the trenches concept.
Yes, imagine a bag, and I tell you there are only white balls in it, evidence for God. You reach in, you pull out history, that's a white ball. You pull out textual reliability, white ball. You pull out prophecy, white ball. You pull out forensic anomalies, another white ball. The skeptic keeps staring at this growing pile of white balls and says, there has to be a black ball in here somewhere.
Because finding another white ball implies a reality that maybe they don't want to accept.
At a certain point, refusing to accept the accumulation of evidence, it isn't skepticism anymore. It's a decision of the will.
That brings me to the psychological dimension, which I think is maybe the hardest part of this entire debate. If the archaeology is there, Pilate's stone, Caiaphas's tomb, and the texts are reliable, and these lab results are this baffling, why isn't everyone a believer? Is it just ignorance?
I don't think it's ignorance. I think for many, it's a father defect. This is a term coined by the psychologist Paul Witz. He analyzed the lives of famous atheists, Marx, Freud, Sartre, Nietzsche, and he found this really consistent pattern. Almost all of them had fathers who were either abusive, absent, or just weak.
That feels a bit like a cheap shot at atheists. Oh, you just have daddy issues.
It's not meant as an insult. It's a psychological observation about projection. If your earthly father is a tyrant, or he's absent, you project that image onto the Divine Father. But even deeper than that, it's about autonomy. Thomas Nagel, the famous atheist philosopher, he admitted this very candidly. He said, I don't want the universe to be like that.
He doesn't want there to be a God.
Correct. Because if Jesus is God, and he says, I am the way, well then I am not the God of my own life. I am a creature. I am accountable. I have to change. And that is a terrifying surrender for the human ego.
I can see that. It's the difference between an intellectual assent, okay, the history is probably true, and a personal submission. I will follow this. You could admit the history is likely true, but submitting your will is a massive leap.
And that is where that lunatic argument we started with, it flips on its head. The skeptic thinks Jesus is the lunatic. But if the evidence holds, if the tomb was empty, if the prophecies align, if the tissue is living myocardium, then the person who refuses to believe is the one acting irrationally. They are betting their entire eternal life on the non-existence of a God who has left fingerprints all over the crime scene.
You're framing it as a gamble, a kind of Pascal's wager.
It is the ultimate wager. Jesus offers something no other figure offered. Buddha offered enlightenment. Muhammad offered a law. Jesus offered himself. I am God. That claim demands a verdict. You cannot just say, oh, he was a nice guy. As we discussed, he's either God or he's a bad man. And the evidence points away from him being a bad man.
I have to admit, the convergence is what makes it so difficult to dismiss. If it were just one thing, just the texts, or just one weird blood sample, it would be easy to wave away as an anomaly. But when you stack the manuscript stability, the external historical verification from enemies like Celsus, the statistical improbability of the prophecies, and then these modern forensic anomalies, it does create a formidable wall of evidence.
It does. And remember, this isn't a dead hypothesis.
Christianity is not in recession. It started with one man in Galilee 2,000 years ago, and today 33% of the world professes this faith. It's the only religion that grows significantly by conversion, not just by birth rate.
And that growth often happens in places of intense persecution, which goes right back to your point about the martyrs.
Exactly. The balls of white just keep coming up, and as Blaise Pascal said, God leaves enough light for those who want to see and enough darkness for those who don't. It ultimately respects our freedom. You have to choose to look at the evidence.
Well, we have certainly laid out a lot of that evidence today, from the 25,000 manuscripts to the myocardium in the Eucharist. It is a lot to process, even for a skeptic like me.
It is. And my hope is that our listeners don't just process it intellectually, but that they let it challenge that decision of the will. The most reasonable conclusion, based purely on the data, is that Jesus is God. And if that is true, it changes absolutely everything.
It certainly does. It removes the option of indifference.
Before we sign off, I just want to remind our listeners that if this discussion has sparked a desire to bring a reminder of this truth into your daily life, please visit rosaryteam.com. You can support the show, but more importantly, you can support your own spiritual life with holy art.
Thank you for listening to the Rosary Team Podcast.
Ave Maria.